Welcome to the Core Women Podcast, the place for women entrepreneurs, authors, and self-starters looking to build community and gain valuable insights through expert interviews with women at the top of their game. Join your host, podcaster, producer, expert coach, entrepreneur, and author, Dr. Summer Watson, as she aims to inspire and empower you through these candid conversations. Lean in and embrace the journey. It's time to start the show. Here's your host, Dr. Summer Watson.
Welcome to another impactful episode of the Core Women Podcast, where today's guest is Loren Rosario-Maldonado, a leader whose career spans multiple industries with a proven track record of transforming organizations and setting new benchmarks of excellence. Despite her success, Loren always sensed something was missing in her approach to leadership and connection until she discovered cultural intelligence. In her groundbreaking new book, Becoming the Change, The Power of Cultural Intelligence, Loren shares her personal journey of self-discovery and the impact that cultural intelligence has had on her life and her career. She passionately explores how embracing cultural intelligence can deepen our understanding of ourselves and others, unlocking new possibilities for connection, empathy, and growth. Let's jump right into this and welcome Loren.
Thank you so much, Summer. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm so excited.
I am excited to have you here. Before we dive into your professional journey, if you could describe your journey to this point in one word, what would that word be and why?
One word that comes to mind is labyrinth. I've always felt like there were all these twists and turns, but somehow they led me to where I am today. And it's the perfect word to reflect my journey.
I've never had that word. That's beautiful. So let's continue the conversation, really exploring the evolution of your journey. You've had a highly successful career across diverse industries. Let's talk about your personal evolution and the realization that cultural intelligence was the missing piece in your leadership approach. Let's talk about that.
I didn't start my career in a very traditional sense. I worked in retail for many, many years. And somehow, again, labyrinth, somehow I ended up in HR. It was called personnel at the time, and I was handling personnel functions and duties for retail stores. But when my daughter was born, as she was growing, I realized I wanted to work a more regular, quote unquote, job. And so I set the intention to get a corporate job. I had done HR for a few years and felt like it was time to get into corporate. And so here comes another turn. And my first job in corporate was starting up an HR department for an interior design company based in New York. So, New York is the capital of the world. And I was always fascinated and always have been fascinated by how people behave, particularly in the workplace, because here you have people that come from all over the world. And we had people from the Middle East, we had people from Latin America, South America, the Caribbean, Western Europe, and they would always converge at work and somehow coexist in the midst of all their differences. And I've always been a learned individual, always read books. John Maxwell was one of my ultra favorite leadership authors. And yet I always felt like something was missing. This was right around the time when emotional intelligence was starting to gain traction, that this whole talk about servant leadership was very important, which really aligned very well with my values, my beliefs. Yet I always felt there was an underlying current that was always missing. The more that I would practice self-awareness, self-management, servant leadership, inspirational leadership, the more scripted I became and the less connection I had, not only with those I led, but those that I worked with, my peers, colleagues, stakeholders. Fast forward to a few years later when I started working for a global multinational. And right around the time, this disconnect was growing bigger and bigger. I didn't know how to articulate it, but I knew it was always present. All of a sudden I would speak, and I would get deer in the headlights look, even though we spoke the same language, whether it was English or Spanish at the time. During this time, as I was working on my master's thesis, I came across cultural intelligence. First time I had ever heard of the word cultural intelligence. So I'm talking about 2017 at this point.
Mm.
And I remember reading the description of what it meant and feeling like something finally clicked for me. That what I was experiencing was actually factual, evidence-based research, and that it was real, very real, not often talked about because we're always talking about emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
I like to say that emotional intelligence is the sexier, trending side of personal development, but cultural intelligence, that's your sweet spot. Cultural intelligence really reflects the way our perception and our behavioral preferences are shaped by our culture, and not just our culture, but our cultural beliefs and our lived experiences. And why is this important? It's because we live in a world that is so diverse that there are cultural nuances that impact the way we approach how we communicate, the way we approach how we perceive time, the way we prefer to work. All of these different influences are a part of us, and they shape the way we perceive it in ourselves and others. And why this was such a profound aha for me was because as a leader, you're really held to higher ground. You have this great responsibility to motivate and elevate others, to inspire and empower others to grow, to do better, be better. But if you do not understand how their approach to those factors, performance, goals, time, work, interpersonal relationships, and you don't understand that about yourself, you're going to assume, I'm purposely using that word, that they prefer to accomplish these things in the same way that you do.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where self-awareness and emotional intelligence fall short, and where cultural intelligence takes the bar and keeps going. The two work hand in hand. You certainly have to be self-aware, but that awareness has limitations, and it's called your perception. And that perception is based on your background, your lived experience. So this changed everything for me, everything. Not only at work, even though it started in that way, it changed the way I work and relate with my own family, immediate and extended family.
I love that. Oh my gosh, there's so much to that in relation to lived experience, values, communications, as you said, assumptions we make. And there is a place for emotional intelligence for so many different ways of perceiving how we are as leaders, but also cultures, working cultures. So if we disregard that cultural intelligence, that's a huge part of what we're disregarding in the workplace as well.
100,000%.
There's so many things that you had mentioned here. The words lived experience. So by profession, I am a phenomenologist. Phenomenology means lived experience. How are you gaining the lived experience and the information from your participants in research? With that said, how are people gaining information, the lived experience from others in the workplace? Or, as you said, are they making assumptions? Are they just assuming that they're going to set goals the same way because they have the same values? Are they going to set their time and scheduling because that's the way the culture says we have to do it? Well, what about understanding the folks within your paradigm to better understand your current culture and how you want to change that culture? So I love that you described this because there's so much that you have touched on here that really resonates with me, and I'm sure it's going to resonate with the listeners out there as well. As we continue this conversation, I was going to ask you to explain cultural intelligence, but you kind of already did. So what I want to do is jump into the impetus for writing this book. But what was your impetus for writing this book, Becoming the Change, the Power of Cultural Intelligence? How did you want to impact the world by writing this book?
I almost can't find enough words in the dictionary to explain how much of an impact cultural intelligence can have in the quality of your life and the quality of your relationships, your connections. You have no idea how many people write me and say they have reconciliated with family members because they've read my book. It is that powerful. The impetus was that feeling that feeling that, my gosh, here I am, this learned individual who had the audacity to think that I was serving others when I was really serving others in the way that I prefer to be served. Big, big mistake. That I was finally given a tool to help me serve others in the way they need to be served at
Yeah.
home and at work. Classic example that I will never forget. I had this one employee who, again, me, high achiever, right? Go, 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 always facilitating growth and achievement for everyone in the same way I prefer. And so in every one-on-one that we had, I would ask her, how's the certification process? How was the certification? We went on like this for months. And I would get, the runaround and I would get half answered and so forth and so on. Until finally, of course, after doing the work myself, I asked her, we've been talking about this certification for quite some time, but it hasn't gone anywhere. Is this something that is still important to you? Would you like to focus on something else? What is it about the certification that is making you feel stuck? At least that's what I'm sensing. And she said, right now I would like to, but right now I'm focused on my kids. They are at a school age, and right now that's not a priority. I would like to develop my achievement in this way. Suddenly it clicked. It wasn't that she does not prefer to achieve. Her need to achieve is through her value of family. It's through her children's lives. That is what reflects achievement for her in this moment. And understanding cultural anthropology and cultural intelligence, I understood that when you come from collectivist cultures, for example, it's not that you're prioritizing the self over your family or your family over yourself. It's that this is what you value.
Mm-hmm.
There is no hierarchy. This is what you value. There's no good or bad. It is what it is. So as a leader, I'm meant to hold space for her in this very moment and guide her in the way that she needs.
Right.
And it just deepened our relationship in ways that we still communicate today. Had I not had that aha, I would have kept pushing the status quo goal, SMART goal, blah, 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 blah. But this changed the nature and trajectory of our relationship, which in the end changed her development. And by the way, she did end up getting the certification years later out of her own volition.
So it sounds like these types of experiences were the impetus for writing this book, because it could have such a huge impact on both our personal and professional lives. And I like what you mentioned here too, the idea of what's called the golden rule: treat people how we want to be treated. There's the platinum rule: treat people how they want to be treated. So there's a difference, not how we want to be treated, but how they want to be treated. We have to ask what's going on. And that's the platinum rule, to be able to understand how they want to be treated.
That's right.
You also mentioned goals versus priorities. Let's wipe out goals. Goals aren't going to be goals if we don't understand the priorities of that person or that community. And more importantly, if you're building a community and a new culture, then it's important to understand the priorities of the people that work within that culture or that actually exist within that culture.
That's right.
To make the changes. And that's why you asked her different questions to get a set of different answers.
Of course, because you have people who prefer to achieve through collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
You have people who prefer to achieve through individual work, right? Individualistic tasks. There is no right or wrong way. That is just a preference.
Right.
But when you understand these two preferences, you understand that one may appear to be isolating and somewhat aloof and impersonal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other is too social. Oh, the social butterfly, right? You're assuming they're the social butterfly. They are inequipped, they're inept, they're incompetent or incapable of working on their own because they prefer to work with others. No, it's because this is how they approach achievement, through collaboration. You see? So when you understand both, you understand that not every management situation is a management situation. It is a cultural difference.
And I think this is really important. When put into practice, into place, it makes such a difference. It makes for a healthier culture.
Yes.
What are some practical ways organizations can foster cultural intelligence within their teams, and what benefits can they expect from doing this?
They can certainly start by adopting cultural intelligence techniques, frameworks, whether through coaching, team building activities. We know we're in the fourth quarter. A lot of companies are trimming left and right. So start simple. Start with simple team building techniques where you get to understand each other's differences from a personal perspective, not a performative one. If you don't have access to the assessment, right, that you can take from a cultural intelligence center, for example, get books, use them as reading club items for your
Mhm.
team, turn it into an experience rather than a performative requirement. These are all fun ways that you can learn about your own differences as well as your team.
Oh my goodness. I love this. Every company needs a Loren, needs you and this book. Oh, I love it. I love it. So we have covered so much. I know we could have another episode and another episode because I love the whole idea of studying culture. When I went to Berkeley, I would go from culture class to culture class to culture class, and people go, "Is that your major?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just trying to figure people out. I think I'm trying to figure myself out too, right?" And I said, "No, that's not my major, but I just love this." So I take culture and film, culture and literature just to understand. So this is really dear to my heart. I love that you're doing this because I know the impact. I know the importance. And companies, if you're listening out there, it's so important and valuable. So we have covered so much. But as we come to the close of the interview, if you could leave listeners with one tip to foster deeper connection and understanding in their own lives by understanding cultural intelligence, what would that tip be?
Remember the power of choice. The first C is the courage to look in the mirror. The H for humility, to know that you don't and never have all the answers. The O, to stay open to new experiences. The I is to integrate everything we learn because knowledge without action is ideation. The C for curiosity, stay curious. Stay curious with yourself and with others. And the E for empathy. But start with having empathy for yourself. You can't have empathy for others if you don't have empathy for yourself first.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Choice. We all have a choice. Thank you, Loren, for joining me on the Core Women podcast today.
Thank you so much, Summer. You know, I could talk about this subject forever.
So could I. Thank you so much. And you brought such wisdom to us today. So thank you so much, Loren. I really appreciate your time today. You can follow Loren Rosario-Maldonado on LinkedIn, Instagram, and at www.lorenrosario.com. And you can also find her book on Amazon and other retailers.
Thank you for joining us on the Core Women podcast with Dr. Summer Watson. We're so glad you're here and would love to connect more with you. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Core Women, and on Twitter at Core Women 1. For more about Core Women and Dr. Watson, visit corewomen.com. Want more support and resources for amazing women like you? Great! Join Dr. Watson and Jen Fontanilla at the Life, Love, and Money Collective, a Core Women production that aids in understanding the key traits that might be getting in the way of living a life that you are absolutely passionate about. Connect with Summer and Jen and find out more at thelifeloveandmoney.com.